To honor and celebrate the life of one we love, we remember. In every adult dwells the child that was, and in every child lies the adult that will be. As each of us remember the person we knew, we are remembering through the lens of the time that we were able to spend with this person that we loved so much. It is my privilege to invite you to look through my lens, the lens of friendship with Lois Collier, daughter, sister, student, cellist, pianist, who became the wife, mother, grandmother, teacher, performer, and needleworker that you have heard remembered so lovingly today. We were 12 and 13 years old when we met in room 22 at the UK Fine Arts Building on a long ago Saturday morning. So much of our lives were formed in room 22 and room 17 and the long hallway lined with the studios of our teachers and conductors. Whatever came before, whatever influences of family, church, and school, this was the place of our most intense focus, the place to which we gave our best time and our best energy. It was the place of weekly private lessons, sectional rehearsals before full orchestra practice. It was the place of bus departures for concert tours and late night returns to our waiting parents. And in room 17, the youth board of the Central Kentucky Youth Orchestra met. As I reflect on the life of Lois Collier, looking back, I see the seeds that blossomed into the accomplished, creative, determined woman we knew and loved. Seeds that were planted, nurtured, and practiced here. Now, there are more stories to tell than there is time to tell them. So I've chosen a few, which I hope will offer you some ahas, recognitions, enhancements for your own experiences and relationships. I'm remembering the words of a young writer who was attempting to write a biography of her father. And she said to me, I want to go where he went. I want to see the things he saw, know the questions he asked, and the dreams he held. And I must depend on those who walked that part of his journey with him to know him in that way. And so I offer you my lens, the lens of an old friend. And I must begin with the youth board and Marvin Rabin, the orchestra conductor whose faith in his young musicians went so far beyond the music we played. Music he coaxed and pulled to a nuanced maturity that was far beyond the years. The youth board was in charge of attendance and discipline of their peers, as well as policies for membership. Lois was a member of the board when, during a challenging time, the young leaders were bypassed by the adult board of the Youth Music Society, who shocked the orchestra with an announcement that Mr. Rabin had been lured away from Lexington by Boston University, his replacement already hired. Now, emergency meetings to deal with crises were not unfamiliar, nor was late night work, but this situation was far beyond all-nighters to crank out newsletters on our ancient copy machine, or even dealing with rule breakers. Grief and rage roared in young hearts with grown-up ferocity. But grief and rage were going to have to wait because the need for action took precedence. It had to be action that could make a difference. We would go to the top, to Governor Happy Chandler, and ask him to intervene. A letter to the governor was composed, but then we realized that time to depend on the mail service didn't exist. A sympathetic mother was convinced to drive us to the state capitol in Frankfurt, where Lois and I would hand-deliver the letter to the governor's office. Now, it never occurred to either of us that we could not or should not take this action. By morning, the governor's letter to Mr. Rabin and the adult adult board had been delivered to us, and we marched into the medical office of the startled president of the Youth Music Society to deliver the letters and to say that this was not the end of the story, nor was it an appropriate way to conduct the business of the youth orchestra, no matter who the conductor was. We weren't successful in retaining our beloved conductor, and he would subsequently replicate our orchestra and youth board in both Boston and Wisconsin. But for those of you who have experienced Lois's tenacity, you may have called it stubbornness. Perhaps you will recognize its roots and practice. As teenagers, we wandered in and out of each other's homes, sharing our parents and carpools the way we shared accompanying each other's instrumental solos on the piano, and whipping up piano duos like Malaguena and Rhapsody in Blue for the Henry Clay Student Night, where dance lines, wearing very brief costumes, made their moves to popular songs of the day, while we glided on stage in matching formal gowns and enjoyed both our practices and performance, fully aware that what we did was different, and that was just okay. It is only looking back that it's possible to recognize the foundational values imparted in those activities that made up her growing up years. But the deep commitment to service through music, to creativity, to parental involvement in the commitments of their children, and the idea that it was okay to be different from the crowd were important in Lois Corr's growing up. In my remembrance, I saw 4 essential elements to add to this foundation. Lois had a capacity for delving deeply into subjects from the time when I first met her. And remember, she was 12. She was super observant of her peers and the adults around her, and integrated her observations and experiences with the many books she read, and her ponderings about God and life and death. Our conversations often took place on long walks and picnic lunches in the Lexington Cemetery. I have to be thankful for both sets of parents who never questioned what some might have considered odd for teenage girls to do. They simply drove us to our destination and came back for us, pre-driver's licenses and long before cell phones. From the time I first knew her, Lois had an appreciation of art, of books, and of fine craft. She was also curious, and that curiosity led her from an interest in the hand embroidery she saw my grandmother doing to hours sitting beside grandmother in Paris, Kentucky, and learning the basics of embroidery. She practiced pattern stitches and a variety of finishing stitches and cut work on towels and pill cases. And as you know, her practice of this craft evolved into a refinement of her work to an artistic level that gained national recognition as a needlework artist. Of course, as has been mentioned, she created countless family treasures and many gifts. The book in which I wrote my remarks was a Christmas gift to me in 1982. Lois had a sense of humor and mischief that some might have missed, but I saw it often reflected in the teasing of both her father and mine. My dad loved her keen, quick mind and her ability to return tease for tease from a young age, which was pretty unusual in a young person, many of whom are uncomfortable when being teased by an adult. But not Lois. She returned to my father as good as he gave. Long after we were grown and past our overnights and saw each other's parents less frequently, I remember my dad greeting her one day with, "Were those your shoes in the middle of my living room this morning?" Which was a teasing reference to our junior and high school Friday nights, falling asleep on the den sofa in mid-conversation, with our discarded shoes leading my dad to discover us still there the next morning when he woke up. The mischief was manifested many ways, but one I particularly remember was was in our days of sharing theory and conducting lessons with Henry Clay Orchestra Director Joe Beach. Now, the Henry Clay of our day was on East Main Street, across from McGee's Bakery. And if we were not prepared, particularly for our theory lesson, which we often were not, we would just run across the street, buy a half dozen of McGee's chess tarts, and present them to Mr. Beach at lesson time, which was a guaranteed distraction from theory. Now, we didn't know for many years that his wife had him on a strict diet, and she did not share his appreciation for the goodies we brought him, and he never let on. Perhaps the most important element, foundationally, is Lois's passionate, generous, and enduring love. She had a passionate commitment to people and things that were very important to her. And that passion took a dramatic turn when John Yacht came into her life, with an impact unlike any she had experienced before. And together, they wrote an enduring story through all of life's complexities. Her children, grandchildren, and siblings blessed by such enduring love. And whenever I sit down at the grand piano in my living room, I'm reminded of the generosity and loving spirit of my friend, who gifted me with one of her magnificent instruments after my own piano was damaged beyond repair. While we never lived in the same state as adults, a phone call and the spark of an idea might find us traveling with toddler children to a Suzuki violin workshop, taking our children a ride on the L when we would spend the night in Chicago, or getting together on the farm in Kentucky. No matter how long it was between phone conversations, we talked as if we had seen each other yesterday. The adult who came to be dwelt in the child that was, and I believe that the child that was, the beautiful friend I met so long ago in room 22, was always alive in the gifted adult. Today, in her honor and in deep thanksgiving for her life and love, the music plays on, and it always will. Each summer of those growing up years ended with youth orchestra camp, held at Camp Daniel Boone on the Kentucky River. After a long day of rehearsals, orchestra members would gather around a campfire on the banks of the river and reflect on the day and sing songs. The beautiful harmony that came naturally to young musicians floating on the evening air. Just before taps, Dick Allison, our orchestra manager, would stand and by the light of the campfire, sing us to our rest with the song, The End of a Perfect Day. Whit Whitaker will sing it now for Lois and for all who love her.